This is ready to go online. Any questions?
Yeah, I got one. How about the best network imaginable? Let's invent that.
We don't have time for lag or buffering.
Who doesn't want internet that helps AI do your homework even faster?
Come again?
Sorry, what was that?
The next generation 10G network only from Xfinity.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, Phillies home opener edition, sponsored by Xfinity. Today, we're coming to you live from the press box here at Citizens Bank Park, where the Phillies are less than a couple hours, 90 minutes or so away from facing the Cincinnati Reds. I'm Scott Lauber, baseball writer for the Inquirer, and I'm joined by my fellow Philadelphia Inquirer sports reporter, Matt Breen.
What's up, Scott? How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Not as nice today as it would have been yesterday, right?
No, but you can't predict the weather, right? Isn't that what they always say?
I don't know.
At any rate, doesn't it feel like we were just here?
It does. It does. It went pretty fast. I guess I haven't ran the numbers, but I was thinking this has to be the shortest off season in Phillies history, right? Because it's the latest World Series would have went that they played in, and then the season starts earlier now than it used to be. So it flew by. It does. It really seems like we were just here for the World Series, and then we were in Houston, and next thing you know, we're back, and I'm back with you on Gameday Central.
So the only thing I can think of is maybe 2009, because I remember 2009, the World Series going into November. I don't know when the home opener was that year in 2010. So maybe, possibly, but no, I think you're probably right. And look, for our audience watching at home, please head over to inquirer.com/Phillies Game Day for the most up-to-date reporting on the Phillies. And we are here for the home opener. We are 6 games into the season. It did not start the way the Phillies wanted it to. They went 1-5 on their season opening road trip to Texas and New York. It is their worst 6-game start since 2007. But before we get into all of that, and we will get into all of that, I want to think back to the last time we were here. Okay, 5 months ago, it was Game 5 of the World Series. And not to bring up bad memories, but really that was Houston Astros center fielder Chas McCormick making one of the best catches we've ever seen in the 9th inning. It sent the series back to Houston. We know that's where it ended for the Phillies. But for me, just being back here, it kind of brings back a little bit of last year and October and the memories of that playoff run. It's going to be a day to celebrate that playoff run. The Phillies are going to raise their National League pennant today before the game. On Sunday, they'll receive their National League rings. And Matt, let's just kind of start with the benefit of time now. What goes through your mind when we talk about last October and November and what went on here at Citizens Bank Park?
Just how special it was, and kind of like it came out of nowhere. I remember in September here, this place was dead, and the Phillies looked like they were dead, and next thing you know, you're back in October and it's the World Series, and it just happened, and it was fun. It was definitely, the city got on, and baseball was relevant again, and it was special. And you're talking about this being a celebration, and Sunday, obviously I think Sunday might more so because of the ring ceremony. The thing I'm looking forward to is Rhys Hoskins's reaction from the crowd. The reaction he gets, the reception he gets, I think will be the loudest. I don't know if he's here today, but I'm sure he'll be here Sunday to get his ring, and that'll be neat to see. Just because obviously everything he meant to the team, and then to the city, and then to go down the way he went down right before spring training, and it's like your one chance to kind of honor him. And I think knowing Philly and the fans here, that is the guy that's going to get the loudest pop.
Which is ironic, right? Because he's sort of been the guy who kind of is the face of frustration a lot of times from the fans here. Whether it's because the kind of player that he is, right? He'll get really, really hot and then really, really cold, and I know that frustrates people. But he's kind of been the source of, or sort of the target of a lot of frustration since he got here in 2017. And I agree with you. I think he's going to get, if not the loudest ovation, it'll be one of the loudest. Certainly they're going to have highlight videos. One of the highlights probably number 2, at least for me, behind Bryce Harper's home run, was the bat spike by Rhys Hoskins, right? In that first game back against the Braves in Game 3 of the divisional series. It really kind of got things off on the right foot here at home. The playoffs had already started well for the Phillies, and then for that to happen, and then every game thereafter, it felt like somebody had their moment, whether it was JT Realmuto's inside the park home run or the Harper home run against the Padres, or Kyle Schwarber had plenty of moments in the postseason. But really, the Hoskins bat spike to me was a signature moment, and I'm sure that will play over and over and over again, not only this weekend, but throughout the season as people remember that. And I am sure he'll be here. I've not seen him yet, but I'm told that he'll be here. So we'll see if we get that moment today or if it has to wait until Sunday. But either way, I agree. I think it's going to be a special moment. And not only that, but also the uncertainty about, Rhys Hoskins beyond this year. Like, even if he hadn't gotten injured and been out for the season, he's a free agent at the end of the year. And he's the one guy in this positional core, at least, who's not signed up beyond this year. So they don't know if they're going to have this opportunity to do this again with him. And I think that's going to be a special moment. What else are you looking forward to, not only from today, but really, throughout the weekend, Sunday in particular, when they get their rings? Is there anything that you've been kind of waiting for 5 months to see?
I want to see what the ring looks like, right? It's always fun to see how gaudy it is and how unwearable it is. It's always funny, like, they get these rings and these athletes want these rings and that's what you play for. Then you get the ring and it's the size of your house and you can't even wear it. So that's always fun. And it's cool. It's almost, again, like how quick that happened last year, and here they are as national league champions. There's going to be a banner, a flag going up today over Ashburn Alley, and rings on Sunday, and it's back to work though, right? Like, this is you don't win it, you don't. It's not guaranteed. It shows you how hard it is and how rare it is, and next thing you know, you put your head down and you're 1-5. So it's fun, but like, it's not. They have real baseball games this weekend, and they're playing a team that on paper they should take care of, and that's the important part right now, is that they need to take care of business against this later schedule, and they need to get themselves in a good spot. But talk about Rhys Hoskins, you're missing Rhys Hoskins, you're missing your backup first baseman, you're missing him, and that's when this kind of snowball of these injuries right now seems like they're getting out of control.
Yeah. One more note on the rings. I'm not sure I've ever talked to an athlete who wears it. You always ask these guys, hey, like, how often do you break out your ring? And most of the time they say, you know what, I have it in a safe deposit box, or I have it, in my safe at home, or I only break it out for special occasions. And that's one of the big things, is that it's too big to wear around. Like, you can't exactly, just go around, with your ring, because it weighs your hand down. So yeah, I mean, it is funny to see. Everyone's going to get one. If you played for the Phillies last year, at any point in the season, you will receive a ring. So Gene Segura, for example, who is with the Marlins now and will be in next week, will receive his ring next week. Players who played for a second for the Phillies last year and who are elsewhere right now, they will be receiving rings throughout the course of the year. So that'll be really something that'll kind of be interesting. I think there's 50-something rings being given out to players. So it's definitely going to be something to see, and I'll want to get a look at that as well at some point this weekend. But you mentioned it's back to business, and we do have some news to bring to you today in advance of the home opener. Derek Hall got some bad news. The sprained thumb is a torn ligament in his thumb. Talked to him this morning. He will have surgery on probably Wednesday. It will not be season ending. He expects to play again this year, but it's going to be a little while. These things tend to take, a couple of months, 6 weeks, a couple of months. So the Phillies will be on their third baseman in Game 7 of the season. Today it's Cody Clemens. Alec Boehm will get some time at third base, although it's primarily going to be against tough lefties only. Rob Thompson cleared this morning that Alec Boehm is our third baseman. They don't view him as someone who's going to move over there now. Matt, how much can a team withstand, right? Because the Phillies aren't alone. They were just in New York playing the Yankees, who had 9 players on the injured list on opening day. The Mets have 8 pitchers on the injured list right now. The Braves have 6 pitchers, including their ace and their closer. So it's going around, the injury bug, but it's hitting the Phillies pretty hard right now. And how much do you think they can withstand, given how much the organizational depth is being tested right now?
Especially with Harper, being injured, but obviously there's a hope that he's, there's an end to that. He's coming back. So, but right now it's tough to weather that without him. And when the injuries happen, both at first base, like today, Derek Hall was not the long-term answer at first base. I don't think anybody believed that, but he's a pretty good short-term option until you were able to trade for somebody, because it's April 7th. No one's making a trade today for, to give you a viable option at first base, where you had one Derek Hall that could get you to maybe June, and then you upgrade, when you get closer to the deadline and teams start to know where they are. But it's tough. It's really hard. And I was talking to the guy that scans our credentials here in the press box, and it's like your fantasy football team. Bring it back to that, and it's like you lose your one starter, you got a guy on the bench, and then you lose him. It's like that's your whole point. That's your security blanket. That's what Derek Hall was there for. Now you lost him. Now you got Cody Clemens, who plays first base all of a sudden. I guess I don't know. I mean, I didn't know he was a first baseman until today. So now here he is. He's playing first base. Welcome to the Phillies, and hopefully Alec Boehm can move over there, and that would be, I think I know that's not what Rob Thompson said, but in my opinion, it would be Boehm at first and Sosa at third, and hope that works. But that's not what you want. And I think it's funny you talk about Hoskins being this polarizing player, and it's going to take a season-ending injury for us to, as a collective whole, to understand how important he was to this lineup. That you can't just replace him with, the guy that was waiting in AAA.
I thought we were at that point in 2021, right? Wasn't 2021 the year that he missed the last 2 months or last 6 weeks with a abdominal strain that he eventually needed surgery? And you remember
the pandemic year, right?
Was it pandemic year or was it 21? I thought it was 21 the year after.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
Right. He had something in 22.
The pandemic year was the thing at first base when he slapped
the elbow
ball or something.
Was the elbow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I thought we got to that point, though, where you saw what it looked like without him, right? And how much they missed him. The stretch run in 21 wasn't great. They wound up missing the playoffs, and it wasn't all because they didn't have Rhys Hoskins, but that was a big part of it. So I thought we got to that point, and yet even last year, there were still points during the year where, you heard like fans say, well, they got to move on from this guy or whatnot. Well, he's a huge part of the lineup. And, Derek Hall, like you said, was a good short-term fill-in. He showed that last year when he filled in for Bryce Harper as the DH. If you put him in the right situation, and he played most of the time against right-handed pitching and didn't play against lefties, and, it was he was able to succeed. He was able to have success. He hit 9 home runs. He slugged .550. He did a nice job in the middle of the order while Harper was out. But that didn't, that wasn't a long-term solution. At least this was going to be a good solution to get you to a point where you could go, trade for a CJ Cron if Colorado moves on from him at the deadline or something like that. Well, now you're not even going to have that. And it's really not only just the injuries. It's when they hit. And I remember sitting down talking to John Middleton at the start of spring training, and he said, last year they got healthy at the right time. As much as they got hot at the right time, they got healthy at the right time. They got Zach Wheeler back. They got Bryce Harper back. Now, if Zach Wheeler gets hurt or goes on the IL 2 weeks later, he's not ready for the postseason. If Bryce Harper gets hit on the hand and breaks his thumb a month later, he's first starting to come back around the postseason. So it's the timing of the injuries. It's when they strike. It's having, one starter go down and then he comes back and then another starting pitcher goes down. Well, they lose Andrew Painter and Ranger Suarez at the same time in spring training, and now they're down 2 starters. So it's all in the timing. And so far the timing has not been good. It's got something to do with why they're 1-5. And, they're going to have to weather this. They're going to have to get through this. I heard somebody say this morning, well, if Derek Hall's going to miss 6 weeks or 8 weeks, this is the time of year to do it. I guess, except that it's harder to replace him now because Colorado's not trading CJ Cron in April. They might trade him in July. So I'm sure the Red Sox are going to. I'm sure the Red Sox are going to talk about Bobby Dahlbeck. He's in the minor leagues, someone that Dave Dombrowski's familiar with. But, the bottom line is there aren't a whole lot of teams that are moving players right now. So you're going to have to get by with what you have. And, the Phillies organizationally, their depth is going to be tested, and we're going to find out what they have at the back of their 40-man roster and even beneath that, I think, as they get through this year. I guess just kind of coming off, you watched, most of the road trip, Matt, coming out of Texas, coming out of New York, other than the injuries, what was your takeaway from the way the season started?
Probably not the panic. I think it's like a mindset. You talk about the last time we were here, or and watching them in October. It's almost like we watched the Phillies with the football mindset where every pitch mattered and every game was like week one. And, it's so important. At football, you have to win every game, and baseball in the playoffs, you had that. Now it's like reset and relax. They're 1-5. That's okay. It's a long season. They fired their manager last year after Memorial Day. There was a losing streak in September where they looked awful. They got swept by the Cubs at Wrigley Field. There's these things happen, but the injuries obviously is alarming. The back end of the rotation, because of the absence of Ranger Suarez, raises my eyebrows. The bullpen, which I thought was going to be a strength, again, it's first week of the season, still should be. You got a lot of, reminds me of the Astros, a lot of hard throwing guys, which we saw in Houston. Is what once you're watching the World Series, like that's what you need. That was my takeaway from the World Series. They needed a bullpen like that, and just to relax. That they will be fine, and don't worry about the standings. Don't look at the Braves. All that matters, what we learned last year, is that with the expanded playoffs, is that the MLB playoffs now is like the NBA. It's like the NHL. It's like just get into the playoffs, and you're fine. It's not a one-game wild card where that was a crapshoot. You're getting a three-game series to start in a wild card series. Even if you're going on the road, you're probably going on the road against a team that's beatable, like the St. Louis Cardinals last year. You're not going to the LA Dodgers. And then you go to the NLDS. So just get in. Don't worry about how many wins. Who cares? How many wins did the Astros have last year? Does anybody know, right? It's like what John Middleton said to you about the 1920 whatever, how much money they make. No one cares. Just win. So it doesn't matter if this team wins 88 games or 130 games. As long as they make the playoffs, that's all that matters, because once you're in, Bryce Harper will be there. Your lineup will be as close. You'll probably have a new first baseman will be there by then. Your team in September and October is going to look a lot different than the team on April 7th. So that's all I'm worried about. I wouldn't, oh my God, they're 1-5, they stink. Like, no, it most likely we'll have a better idea. Obviously, we will have a better idea by the end of May about who this team is. And I think they're going to be in fine shape by the end of September or October, that they're in that wild card hunt.
All right. I agree with everything you just said. And I am definitely the person who always says every year, like, it's baseball, not football. And when I say it's early in baseball, it's really early, right? Like, I think Dave Murphy wrote the other day that if this was football, we'd be like 2 minutes into the second quarter of the first game of the season. And I've done that. I've done that math myself over the years at different times, right? Where I've said, like, how early would we be if this was a football season? But let me throw this one at you, okay? Because I threw this at Kyle Schwarber the other day in New York. If you think back to the last time we were all here, Game 5, World Series, crazy atmosphere, right? And really, it was that way all month long in October last year. Crazy atmosphere, stakes were really high. Now, try duplicating that in April or May or June. You can't do it, right? So when you're coming off of that high as a team, as an athlete, right, isn't it human nature to regard anything less as somewhat of a letdown? And also, when you're coming off the kind of season the Phillies had last year, where they fired their manager at 22-29, and they overcame Bryce Harper breaking his thumb in June, and they overcame getting swept by the Cubs the second to last week of the season, and they got all the way to Game 6 of the World Series. Isn't there a natural tendency when you're 1-5 to say, don't worry about it, it'll be fine. We came through this last year. And maybe you don't feel the appropriate amount of urgency. I'm not saying after 1-5, but, there's already you know how baseball players are. There's already an inclination to sort of say to outsiders, "We'll be fine. It's a long season." Well, when you come through all of that they came through last year, isn't it just human nature to say we'll be fine, even if you're really not going to be fine? Like, at what point do you have to say, okay, last year was last year, put it aside. We're not going to be able to duplicate all that, and this season's got to take on a life of its own. I mean, do you understand what I mean? Like, does that make any sense? And
What do you think they should be panic?
No, not at all. I'm just saying, like, is there a danger in coming off of that high? Because you can't kind of recapture that. Schwarber said it makes total sense, and you do have to guard against that. He's like, but all I can tell you is my one experience with it is in 2017 with the Cubs. We were coming off, the World Series to end all World Series, right? They won for the first time since 1908, broke a hex, all that stuff. Everyone said all year long the Cubs have a World Series hangover because they weren't, gangbusters out of the gate, and they wound up winning 92 games, winning their division, and getting back to the NLCS. So, there are ways to replicate the feeling from a year ago, even if it doesn't exist anymore. Does any of that make sense? Or am I just,
I liked your column. I thought it was good. I read it this morning. But I would say that once you deal with adversity in life, right, it makes you stronger. And this team dealt with adversity last year, and I think that's gained experience. They understand that there is no reason to panic, because maybe if they didn't deal with last year, they would be panicked. But they probably feel a lot more confident in themselves at this point than they did last year when they entered that period of adversity, because they had that experience. They went through the storm together, and they also know that Bryce Harper's coming back sometime relatively soon, sometimes in the next maybe 6 weeks. So you have that to look forward to, and they also know that their general manager or their president of baseball operations has a proven track record here. You don't have to go back to Boston or Florida like he did it here of going and getting guys. And I think they know, they have the faith in the front office that they're going to go and get the first baseman they need. Or they saw Andrew Painter for a week in spring training and know, like, all right, maybe he might be coming back in September or in the second half sometime, and he might be here at the end. So I think there's a pretty good leadership in that clubhouse. Like, you talk to Kyle Schwarber, who would be obviously the best guy to speak on that. And I would be shocked if this is the team that's panicking or folding and after going 1-5. I think that they're a team that's been through a lot last year. It's crazy when you stacked up everything they went through last year. It's like, wow, that really all happened last year. Like, Joe Girardi was the manager a year ago. It seems like 10 years ago. This team has lived so many lives since then, but that's everything they've went through, and they didn't just survive it. They went to the World Series. So I would not, obviously they're definitely not panicking right now.
Let's pivot to some good stuff. You mentioned Bryce Harper, and he took batting practice on the field again today, looked great doing it, hit a couple of balls out of the ballpark. I know everyone's going to say, like, oh, he's going to be back in no time, right? And I do think he's going to be back much sooner than the All-Star break. He's going to be much closer to June 1st than July 15th. But there are still a lot of boxes to check. He has to slide. He has to do a lot of other things to make sure his elbow's ready for that sort of thing, to play in actual games. But Bryce Harper's on his way back. And I'll give you another one. I know a lot of people within the organization feel like one of the things that could swing the pendulum from mid-80s win total to mid-90s win total would be the continued improvement of their three young players in the lineup every day. Alec Bohm, Bryson Stott, and Brandon Marsh. And the three of them have gotten off to a pretty good start, really. They're all hitting. Marsh had, a rough game the other night in New York with a couple of mistakes, one defensive, one on the bases, but he's played well for the most part. All three of them are going to get a chance to play every single day. That includes Stott and Marsh against lefties. And they've all been really good so far. They've all been off to a good start. I think those are things that are positive that you can take from this 1-5 start and say that things are moving in the right direction. How much of a key do you think those three guys in particular, Bohm, Stott, and Marsh, are to kind of what the Phillies want to do here? Because if they're young players who continue to develop, who are taking a step forward, doesn't that make the Phillies that much better?
I mean, I think Bohm almost you can separate him from that group just because of what he did last year and how, especially at the end of the season, how comfortable he looked as an everyday player, especially compared to the beginning of the season. And that's what you need. You can't just sign Bryce Harper and Trey Turner. You have to produce your own guys. And obviously, Marsh they traded for, but it was kind of like you can think of him as Mickey Moniak. So you need to produce your own guys, and you need to supplement the big money you're spending with cheaper contracts, which is what those three guys are. And then that's how it works. And so far, I think there's a lot to dream on with Stott and Bohm. I'm confident can be everyday players. Obviously, you want to see Marsh hit lefties before you say that, but and the other night in New York was not his best night. But I think all three are right now. They're viable everyday players. They're not automatic outs in the lineup, and that's what you need because you know who's producing for you. So everybody else has to be just solid, and you let a guy like Trey Turner, JT Realmuto, Kyle Schwarber, Harper when he's healthy. That's who you lean on and supplement it with pretty good everyday players.
What's your updated Bryce Harper return date? We should start a pool here.
I said 6 weeks, and I forgot that May is a month. I'm looking at my laptop, and I see April. I jump straight to June. That's longer than 6 weeks, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So now I'm looking at the schedule, and I will say he's back Friday night, June 23rd. Buy your tickets now. Bryce Harper night at the bank against the Mets.
That's the start of the Mets. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, June 20th is the Braves, right?
Yeah.
Start of a homestand? Mm-hmm. That's the date I've had circled.
That's when he's going to be finishing his rehab with Allentown.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You think so?
No, they already talked to them. He's got a hotel already booked.
No. He wraps up the rehab the weekend before, wherever in Reading or in Lehigh, and he's back that Monday. Is it a Monday night?
Or how about this? Today, opening day, Dan Baker on the mic, batting third, and Harper just walks out like Roger Dorn. I'm activating myself.
Like when Roger Clemens came back, right?
Yeah, he's in the box.
He was in the owner's box.
As a tribute to Cody Clemens.
As a tribute to Cody Clemens, Bryce Harper just decides to descend from the owner's box and got third today. I'm going to go June 20th, and I'm going to stick with it. I know everyone thinks he's going to be back Memorial Day weekend, but I think that's pushing it a little bit. So we'll see what happens. How about Andrew Painter? When do we get an Andrew Painter debut?
I'm going to say he's back in September, and he is David Price in the bullpen for the playoffs.
Oh, interesting. David Price circa 2008. I'm going to say after the All-Star break, because obviously he's going to go pitch in the minors for a little while. But just to tell you what it was like in spring training before he got hurt. I mean, he was going out to throw a bullpen, and the owner. So like John Middleton, we were walking out the first day, and Painter was throwing a bullpen. So John Middleton passed me on the right, like a car on the highway, if I was going too slow. And I said, "Are you going where I'm going?" And he said, "Mr. Painter's throwing today. I'm going to go see that." So, I mean, I know it seemed like crazy hype back here at home, but I mean, it was real. It was real. And so their breath is held that, he's going to be able to pick up a ball next week and not feel any pain. And if that's the case, they'll move slowly. But I think we'll see him after the All-Star break. And I think you're right. I think he could serve as something of a mid-season acquisition to bring in a talent like that and a guy who could have an impact, in the second half of the year. So we'll see how that goes as well. You have any final thoughts, I guess, before we sign off and get ready for the home opener?
I think final thoughts is be patient, relax. This team's really good. They didn't make the playoffs last year by accident. I think we talked about this in Houston. Somebody said it was the 93 Phillies, and this is not the 93 Phillies. This was a team built to get to the World Series. They took a weird route to get to the World Series, but they got there with the team that you thought they would. It's an awesome team. It's a great team. You spent a lot of money on this team. Once you get the star back in right field and you figure out first base and the rotation gets healthier, they're going to be really good. It's really, again, like I said this earlier, it's the NBA playoffs, it's the NHL playoffs, it's not the old school MLB playoffs. you just got to get in. And once you get in, whoever's the best team, they beat a wild card team in the NLCS, right? So that's just shows you 2 wild card teams played for the pennant last year. Get in. Who cares? No one remembers if the Phillies win the World Series this year. Well, they only won 87 games and won a wild card, right? No, that's all. It doesn't matter. So they're a really good team. I think I'd be stunned if we're talking about an awful team at the end of the season. They will relevant baseball, and they will go to the playoffs as a wild card team.
Well, there you go. You heard it from Matt Breen. The Phillies are playoff bound. No, I think you're right. I think it's way too early, but I do think it's worth thinking a lot about 2022 this weekend, especially today and on Sunday. And I think it's worth taking a last look back at last year and what happened and how great that was, and remembering that, trying to capture that, and then jumping into this new season, which is going to look a whole lot different in its own way than this year did. So we want to say thank you for tuning in to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, Phillies home opener edition, sponsored by Xfinity. Be sure to stick around on Inquirer.com/Phillies Game Day to follow along with us as we live tweet throughout the game. We post game-related news, answer your questions and comments, and of course, check us out on Inquirer.com and in the paper, the Philadelphia Inquirer, for all your Phillies coverage today, tomorrow, Sunday, and all year long. For Matt Breen, I'm Scott Lauber. Thank you so much for tuning into Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity.